Hi, my name is Edmund Williams and welcome to Lehr Homestead. On my previous videos I've talked a lot about what a Lehr garden is and how it does what it does. Today I wanted to talk a bit about the benefits of a Lehr garden. What's it good for, how will it benefit your life, and at the end I'll cover a little bit of the disadvantages of it. There aren't many, but they're worth full disclosure at any rate. So the first thing that really jumped out at me as something that was really amazing about this garden that I've been working on here is the level of effort, the level of maintenance that it requires when you're running it. It's something where I've worked to automate as many of the processes as I possibly could. It really started with the question of who can do this that isn't me, and started looking at the technology. Instead of using the technology to replace natural processes, I'm using the technology to replace human effort and to enhance and accelerate natural processes so that the natural processes can do the work that they're really designed to do. As such, once you get a Lehr garden up and running, it requires very little maintenance. Not to say that you can't tinker with it if you're the kind of person like me who actually likes to tinker. I come out here and tinker every day, but if I get a busy day, if I have things that I've got to do, I don't have to tinker with it pretty much at all. There's just so much of it that's automated, as long as really the only pieces that I haven't automated yet are the planting and the harvesting. And someday I actually would like to play around with automating even some of those aspects. But for the time being, really the fertilizing, the watering, the weeding, all of the maintenance that you have to do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis with a regular garden is really not much of an issue. I don't have numbers yet because I'm out here, I'm still under process of building the garden out. But I can tell you that in terms of required maintenance, I'm talking maybe an hour a week or less, probably significantly less. The second thing is high productivity. So one of the things that I really like about it is because the soil is so fertile, and because there's additional nutrients coming through from the fish tank, you get a lot of productivity out of the garden. You get a lot of growth. You get a lot of different plants that are sharing the same space. I mean, you can see behind me here, I've got sunflowers, sweet potatoes, and squash all growing more or less on top of each other, and they're all very, very happy right now because they're getting the nutrients that they need to grow big and healthy. Another advantage is water usage. I live in the Phoenix, Arizona area. It is hot here, it is dry here, it is the middle of summer. And for the month of June, which is really when it starts to get really, really hot, my garden used an average of 16 gallons of water a day. That was water usage to keep the plants happy. That was the water usage to run the evaporative cooler on the tanks, to keep the water in the tanks at a reasonable temperature. And 16 gallons is about an average length shower, just for reference. It's not something that's going to make a significant impact on any household's water bill. The next thing that really is a nice benefit to it is the nutritional content of the food. So plants need a diverse soil composition. They need a diversity of inputs. They need a lot of different nutrients that are in the soil. They need an active biological community that they're growing in, and if they get what they need, then it comes out in a healthy plant, a plant that resists disease, but also a plant that was actively nutritious. That also comes out in the flavor. When you take a plant and stress it out by putting it outside, you expose it to environmental conditions, hot and cold organisms, and then you give it all of the nutrition that it needs to meet its needs. You develop a deep, robust flavor. And generally the flavor and the nutrition tend to go together. They tend to be something that actually works hand in hand. You know, have the flavor, you have the nutrition, and vice versa. The other thing, of course, is that because I don't spray anything, I don't do pesticides, I don't do herbicides, I don't do fungicides, anything that I put in here would adversely affect my fish. So I don't spray anything. And this is my backyard. This is growing a couple of feet from my back door, which is right inside my kitchen. I don't have food miles, I have food feet. I know exactly where this came from. I know exactly what went into it, and I know exactly what I'm eating, what I'm feeding my children. Of course, also local food is another consideration. You know, there's a lot of local food movements out there. It doesn't get any more local than right in your own backyard. And of course, you know, for those who are looking to live a more regenerative, sustainable lifestyle, this is definitely something that can be a part of this lifestyle. One of the other things that I found that's kind of neat about it is if you have a large enough yard that you want to grow yourself a food forest, Lehr garden can absolutely be a part of that food forest. What ends up happening is that the soil breaks down organic matter. So as you trim trees, as you rake leaves, as you prune bushes and shrubs and pull out weeds in other parts of your yard, all of those waste products become inputs into a Lehr garden. The Lehr garden will turn them into soil. And as the Lehr garden builds its own soil, it actually eventually you kind of hit a point where you need to produce soil as an output. So you can actually take that soil out and top dress rich, fertile, organic soil around your perennials that are out elsewhere in the yard. And so you get this synergy between the perennials that are growing in the soil and the annuals that are growing in the Lehr garden. I'm talking about inputs. This is actually a really low input garden. I don't buy soil. I don't buy fertilizer. I don't buy any of the, again, pesticides, herbicides, etc. What I do put as inputs into my garden is fish food. You know, I'm always looking for trimmings. Usually I can get those either around my yard or from neighbors, something that will allow me to build more soil. I almost never have to pay for that. Of course, your mileage may vary. But in terms of going down to the store and having to buy pots of soil, bags of soil, or a bunch of fertilizer or anything like that, that's not something from a year-to-year standpoint. A Lehr garden is very low input, very low maintenance. The soil builds itself, it maintains itself, it keeps itself fertile through the processes that are going on here. So let me talk a little bit about the disadvantages. So the first one is going to be the initial setup cost. Obviously, there's a bit of infrastructure here. There's you know, we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars unless you have a really large space to set up. It's going to depend a little bit based on materials and exactly how much work needs to be done in your space. But it does take an investment in money to buy the tanks, to buy the lumber or steel or whatever it is that you're going to build it out of it. It's going to take some time to get it all built, to get it all up and running. Of course, you get that payoff once it is up and running. It's just a really solid investment. The other thing that I really see as a problem, I don't know that it's a huge problem, is the water. Because the water flows through soil, it is not pristine, clear, crystal water that you're gonna, you know, want to. I don't mind swimming in it myself. If I ever get a system that's big enough, I hope to have a pond. But the water develops a bit of a brown tinge to it, just because of the tannins and humic acids and other such organic compounds that the soil puts in it. Now, as the soil matures, those tannins reduce pretty significantly. When you first build a system, the water is about the color of coffee. strong coffee, and it starts to kind of reduce in darkness over time. After a year or so, it starts to go down to maybe a weak tea, and you'll get little rise and fall as the different biological communities live and thrive and die in the system. But for the most part, as you add more materials, you get a little bit of a spike in it. But it's something that always retains just a little bit of color to it. I've not yet found a way to get rid of that, and have not talked to anybody who knows how to get rid of it. I talked to a pond guy, and he said a heavy-duty carbon filter, but it's something that you would have to. It would just be really a lot of effort to do that. I'm not sure it would be worth it. The last disadvantage is because the Lehr garden relies on an ecosystem. The ecosystem has to grow into place. So when you first put in the raw materials to start creating the soil, what happens is the organisms ideally are all pretty much there that you need to be there. And what they're going to do is the ones that have the right conditions for growth are going to take off. These are all very small organisms. They have a very quick life cycle. They can reproduce in a lot of cases, sometimes multiple times a day. And so they grow quickly, they reproduce quickly. And so you get these little rise and fall of different organisms. And it takes typically in the neighborhood of 3 to 6 months to get the organisms to all equalize in such a way that the growing conditions are perfect for the plants. And so what happens is you get something in the first several months of a Lehr garden. You get a system that's going to be anywhere from struggling a little bit to about as productive as your typical hydroponics, because if you've got the fish, the nutrients are still there. It's just not quite getting the soil nutrients that it needs. But once you hit about 3 to 6 months, things to really start to kind of click, and the organisms are all hitting their equilibrium in the ecosystem of the soil, and then you start to get really good explosive growth. And this is a pretty good example here. The sweet potatoes just started taking off about a month ago, and they're just going crazy. I've got these squash plants. These squash plants were seeds just a month and a half ago, and so they grew up very quickly. They've got what they need from the soil, and they're just exploding and bright and vibrant despite the hot temperatures here. So it's something that you just got to be a little bit patient. But once you've got it up and running, it'll just keep going year after year. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. I'll talk to you later. Thank you.